panel, but I urge you to hold off and listen to the second and third points that I want to make. Okay, could you go to the second slide? When we talk about decreasing production of militarism, that includes a lot of jobs besides just making the bombs. It includes all the McDonald's workers who even have a restaurant down the street. It could mean the entire town is having, would be disappeared if you remove the military production, and that would not make our proposal a very popular one. And so my point is that shifting war production to different jobs is only a partial solution. If you could show the third slide, the next slide, please. So one way that people talk about where jobs could be moved is a smaller class, for education, a smaller class size. And that's true, but if and only if the shift in jobs goes to more teachers and doesn't go to more administrators and bureaucrats like the education system loves to do. Another example that I could think of, especially from my book about Cuba, is that if you shift workers to medicine, that does not help. Could you go to the next slide? Okay, it doesn't help if you increase work for insurance workers in insurance companies like coding or developing Medicare Advantage plans. And like was said in the introduction, Cuba spends a lot less money on medical care, like 90% less per person, but has better outcomes than the United States. And so my point is, from these few examples, that shifting military workers to research would not help in much of anything if the research that they're doing is actually damaging. If they're doing the wrong things, such as increasing the research on genetically engineered organisms, or increasing research on new pesticides, or increasing research on nuclear power, that doesn't help anything. So the problem that I see is not that there's jobs with insufficient workers, but that workers are paid for doing the wrong things. And also people are often paid for doing nothing useful. If I could look at the next slide. You might have heard of the book by David Graeber from 2018 called Bullshit Jobs. And he suggests that most jobs in the United States are pointless and destructive, and that it causes profound psychological violence for people to have jobs that are not actually helping anything. So I want to go to the second point, which is that when we're talking about I think instead of talking about the military, we need to talk about the war economy, because what's done in the war economy is far larger than just producing guns, bombs, and missiles, which is bad enough in itself. So here we have an example of nuclear power in Chernobyl. I mean, we don't really need more research in nuclear power. We need to figure out how to shut nuclear power down. If we could look at the next slide. The problem with a lot of the alternative energy, actually virtually all of the alternative energy, is that it involves land grabs. It involves throwing people off of their land in order to get the necessary minerals in order to make all the alternative energy. If we could look at the next slide, the war in nature includes deforestation, chemical poisons. So what I'm talking about is that it's not just the bombs that destroy people, it's the entire war economy that is shown in many different ways. I couldn't find a good slide to illustrate this, but international trade deals are financial warfare. I mean, international trade deals are a way to get poor countries to pay into rich countries by financial deals. And as Wes Jackson of the Land Institute once said when he was at a program in St. Louis, it's not just fossil fuels that are the problem, it is energy itself. And alternative energy is just part of the war on nature. If we could look at the next slide, slide 9. And another type of war that most of us experience every day if we go to work is the war on workers. Because ever since the Industrial Revolution, there's been an expanded division between middle and manual labors, which is bad for both sides. Basically, when capitalism was introduced, it really expanded the difference between those who are deemed to be inferior who must do manual labor, and those who are deemed to be superior, who tend to have various managerial sorts of jobs. And so what I'm talking about in the war economy is all of the forms of domination is part of the war economy. And we all experience that in virtually all of our relationships, whether we dominate somebody else at work because we're a supervisor or because we're both dominated by those above us and dominate the people who we might supervise. Okay, the third point that I want to make is reducing the war economy involves a total economic transformation. It's very unfortunate that people who talk about and write about degrowth or militarism very rarely mention a shorter work week. And to me, a shorter work week is the key to decreasing, to reducing war production. If I could look at the next slide. Okay, this kid agrees with me. We need to change jobs dramatically, and we all need to work a lot less, because if we're just shifting to one job to another but maintaining a 40-hour work week, we'll just transform the exploitative nature of work. We'll transform what sort of destructive effects there are, but we won't reduce the destruction itself. So one of the ways to do this is to reduce the division between manual and physical labor. It's basically unhealthy two things are unhealthy. It's unhealthy to stand on your feet all day long doing physical labor. It's unhealthy to sit at a desk all day long doing intellectual labor. We need to absorb workers from the war economy to doing multiple types of work. We need to completely redesign jobs. And so the issue becomes, if we could look at the next slide, the issue becomes who will make the decisions about redesigning jobs. And I like to say that I never have faith that the working class will do everything right, but I do have total faith that the ruling class will do everything wrong. They make decisions about communities, workers, and natures that are absolutely destructive, because profit is always the most important factor. So what I believe needs to be done is to transform the war. In the war on workers is one of the parts of the war economy, so that workers themselves make the fundamental decisions about redesigning work, about redesigning not just how we work, but what we actually produce, whether through unions or other workplace organizations. If I could look at the next slide, what we basically need to do is a lot of people who are for degrowth say that we need to decrease consumption, we need to decrease production and consumption, but they're actually two completely different phenomena. We can expand consumption while we reduce production. And there's thousands, millions of examples. I just thought of something very simple, which I call the blue gene paradox. Which would you rather have, 2 pair of jeans that last 10 years each, or 3 pair of jeans that last 5 years each? You know, from an employer's point of view, you want to get people to buy as much stuff as possible. So if you make 3 pair of jeans that last half as long, you're better off because you have 3 things. You know, if you have 2 pair of jeans, they last for 20 years, then the consumption, the use goes up while the production goes down. And that's something that I think a degrowth economy we should do this throughout the economic structure of society. Working people should decide how we can produce products that are better and better. And so the big issue is how can we degrow the war economy while having more jobs. 1 minute left. Okay, a shorter work week, fewer wars, and less environmental destructions. If I could look at the last slide. Okay, so what I've talked about is things that are sort of formula, things that are general principles, but I think what we need to remember is that the most important thing we need to do is to change people's hearts and minds about what sort of society we want, how we want to work, what we want to produce, and how we can do it less destructively. And so the goal that I perceive that we need to have is to reduce domination in as many areas of life as we can. Thank you very much.